The crisis has begun.
It's hard to believe the Arrowverse's big crisis has finally arrived. This is a story the CW has been building towards in some form since 2014, and certainly with great purpose over the past year. Even in 5 episodes, there's a lot of ground to cover, but if Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1 is any indication, fans needn't worry about this ambitious crossover living up to the hype.
Love your suit. If you want, I can probably get an upgrade.
Depends on how attached you are to your hand.
Pretty attached.
The first chapter of Crisis unfolds pretty much exactly as fans of the 1985 comic book series would expect. Entire universes are being wiped right out of existence by an unstoppable wave of antimatter, and only a crack team of heroes assembled by the Monitor stand a chance of saving existence. The plot borrows what's necessary from the source material without getting as bogged down in superfluous characters and details. It's actually pretty impressive how neatly this episode is able to lay out the framework of the crossover and get newcomers up to speed. Not only is Crisis Part 1 accessible, it establishes a clear set of stakes for the conflict, both in terms of cosmological scope and the emotional struggles of the main characters. An early scene in Argo City sets the tone nicely, just as the comic cleverly recreated Superman's origin story using the Earth 3 Luthor family. This episode forces Clark to live out his own parents' nightmare and send his infant son rocketing away from a doomed world. Very quickly, this crossover establishes itself as the biggest and most destructive in Arrowverse history. On the other end of the tonal spectrum, Brainiac 5 and the Atom are great at injecting some much-needed comedy into an otherwise grim hour of television. Jesse Rath and Brandon Routh both have impeccable comic timing, and the jokes never get to the point where they undercut the drama.
Jonathan! Yes, you go get Jonathan. I'll stay here.
This being Supergirl's portion of the crossover, Part 1 focuses heavily on exploring how the impending end of the world affects characters like Kara, Clark, Alex, and Lena. Kara and Clark have a great scene involving mutual grief over Argo City that perfectly illustrates why Kara is the stronger and more resilient of the two, without necessarily taking anything away from Clark in the process. For all the focus on Supergirl and her supporting cast, this is also a very critical episode for Arrow fans. Ollie passes the torch on to Mia, and then the episode culminates in his long prophesied death. And what better way for the Arrowverse's original hero to go out than fighting off hordes of shadow demons and literally saving 1 billion lives in the process? Is this the true end of Oliver Queen? It does seem unlikely Stephen Amell will only appear in one of the 5 chapters of Crisis. Not to mention, we know Amell has been hard at work shooting the Arrow season finale. No doubt the crossover will find some way of keeping Ollie into the mix, whether that involves a resurrection, Ollie being turned into a slave of the Anti-Monitor, or something else.
You became a hero. A husband, a father.
Crisis on Infinite Earths is undoubtedly the Arrowverse's biggest crossover to date. In terms of the sheer number of characters and the scope of the conflict, it dwarfs everything that's come before. But massive scale is nothing without real human drama anchoring the story, and that's something Part 1 recognizes. This episode finds hope as well as tragedy in the destruction of an entire universe, and it gives the Arrowverse's first hero the send-off he deserves. The bar is already set very high, and there are still 4 episodes left to go.
Everything we know, everything there is, and everything there ever was, is doomed.
Thanks for watching. For more on Crisis on Infinite Earths, check out our videos on the road leading up to Crisis and our spoiler discussion for the first part of the crossover. And as always, subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.
I'll back you up. I know the train.
As will I. I happen to be excellent with children.